Good day, everyone. Today we are going to discuss logical opposition. Let us define first opposition. It is a relation between propositions with the same subject and predicate, but different quantity or quality or both. The key term here is same subject and predicate, meaning you cannot apply the rules of opposition if the propositions involved do not have the same subject and predicate terms. But if they have the same subject and predicate terms, they may be different in quantity or quality or both. For example, all provinces of Visayas were affected by Typhoon Yolanda. Some provinces of Luzon are in normal situation. Can we use the rules of opposition in this given? The answer is no, because they have different subject and predicate terms. And rules of opposition can only be used, I would like to emphasize that, it can only be used if the propositions involved have the same subject and predicate terms. For example, some students are not absent. Therefore, all students are absent. The first thing that you need to determine is whether or not the premise and the conclusion have the same subject and predicate terms. The answer here is yes. They have the same subject and predicate terms, but different in quantity and different in quality. The premise is an O proposition, correct? While the conclusion is an A proposition. So we can use here the rules of opposition because it falls under the definition. Another example, if it is false to say that all members of UST volleyball team are from AB, therefore some members of the UST volleyball team are not from AB. So this is an argument and it involves two categorical proposition. The premise is an A proposition, while the conclusion is an O proposition. Determine first whether or not the propositions have the same subject and predicate term, which is true in this argument. So we can use here the rules of opposition. They have the same subject and predicate, but different in quality and quantity. Later, we'll call this contradictory propositions. Okay, there are four types of opposition, namely contradictory, contrary, subcontrary, and subalternation. They are using square of opposition for us to easily remember the rules of opposition and for us to see in a square the gist or the summary of their relation. If you observe the propositions above, A and E, are universal propositions. All right? A and E. While the propositions below are particular propositions. While propositions in the left are affirmative propositions, correct? While the propositions in the right are negative propositions. So here we have contradictory relation between A and O, E and I. Contrary opposition between A and E. They are only for universal propositions. Subcontrary naman for particular propositions, I and O. And then there is a relation of subalternation between A and I and E and O. Let us discuss them one by one. Let's go first to contradictory opposition. It is a relation between two propositions with the same subject and predicate terms, but different quantity and quality. If such is the definition, it is between A and O because they have the same subject and predicate terms, but different in quantity. A is universal, O is particular, and quality. A is affirmative, O is negative. So it is applicable between A and O and vice versa, as well as in E and I and vice versa because of that definition. Example, all philosophers are lovers of wisdom. Some philosophers are not lovers of wisdom. So between A and O, there is contradictory opposition. Some students are Thomasians, all students are not Thomasians. This is also contradictory propositions. The rule is this: they cannot be both true, they cannot be both false. Okay? There is no doubtful truth value in contradiction. In other words, the statements have opposite truth value. If an A is true, the O proposition is necessarily false. If an A is true, it is false, then its contradictory proposition O is necessarily true. They cannot be both true. If you say an A proposition is true and the O proposition is true as well, then that's invalid. It doesn't follow the rules of contradiction. Same thing with E and I. Let's give an example. It is true that some provinces of Mindanao are under state of calamity. Therefore, it is false to say that all provinces in Mindanao are not under state of calamity. The premise is an I proposition, correct? While the conclusion is an E proposition. So between I and E, let me write that. Okay. So A, E, I, O. Between I and E, that's what we call contradictory propositions. Nasunod ba yung rule? They cannot be both true, they cannot be both false. The answer is yes. You say, it is true that some provinces in Mindanao are under a state of calamity. Therefore, it is false to say that all provinces in Mindanao are not under state of calamity. So this is valid. Valid. Next. It is true that some politicians are not corrupt. Therefore, it is also true that all politicians are corrupt. The premise is an O proposition, correct? Premise is an O proposition. While the conclusion is an A proposition. So this is contradictory opposition. Nasunod ba yung rule? It is true that some politicians are not corrupt. You say an O proposition is true. Okay? Therefore, it is also true that all politicians are corrupt. You say the A proposition is also true. Did it follow the rule? The answer is no. So that is invalid. Contradictory propositions cannot be both true, cannot be both false. So this argument did not follow the rule of contradiction, so this is invalid. Again, they cannot be both true, they cannot be both false. Meaning, if one proposition is true, then its contradictory proposition is false. If one proposition is false, then its contradictory proposition is true. If you want to use this, A and O, E and I, or vice versa. So that's what we call a contradictory. If you are asked, what is the contradictory proposition of some Thomasians know the relevance of peace talk in Mindanao? Determine first the type of proposition of the given. This is an I. What is the contradictory proposition of an I proposition? E. So the contradictory proposition of that given is all Thomasians do not know the relevance of peace talk in Mindanao. What is the contradictory proposition of every citizen has human rights? Okay. This is an A proposition. What is the contradictory proposition of an A? O. So the answer is some citizens do not have human rights. What is the contradictory proposition of not all planets are habitable? Determine first the type of, this is an O proposition, correct? This is an O proposition. So its contradiction is an A. All planets are habitable. All right. Next opposition is what we call contrary. It is a logical opposition involved between two propositions with same subject and predicate. Mahalaga yun lagi ha. Same subject and predicate. Same universal. You need to remember, contrary, it involves universal propositions, A and E. Same universal quantity, but different quality. If such is our definition, it is between A and E and vice versa. For example, all athletes are players, A. All athletes are not players, E. The opposition involved here is contrary. This is the rule. Write this. They cannot be both true, although they might be both false. Meaning, if an A is true, necessarily the E is false. Or if an E is true, necessarily the A is false. But if an A is false, the E is doubtful. We cannot derive valid conclusion from its contrary proposition. Okay? If one is true, the other one is false. But if the given is false, we cannot derive certain conclusion from its contrary proposition. Example: if it is false to say that all students are dormers, that's an A proposition. The premise is an A proposition. Therefore, all students are not dormers. Is this valid? Remember the rule. They cannot be both true, but they might be, it is possible that both of them are false. Meaning, if one is false, you cannot derive conclusion from its contrary proposition. But in this argument, you say all students, it is true that all students are not dormers. So it did not follow the rule of contrary. It's invalid. Another example, it is true that all criminals commit crimes. So it is wrong to say that all criminals do not commit crimes. Is this valid? Remember the rule. They cannot be both true, but it's possible that they are both false. Nasunod ba yon? The answer is yes. You say in the premise, it's the A is true, and then in the conclusion, you say necessarily the E proposition is false. Valid ito. Valid. Okay? If you're asked, what is the contrary proposition of this given? All classes in Metro Manila are suspended on September 4, 2024. This is an A proposition. What is the answer? It should be an E, di ba? All classes in Metro Manila are not suspended on September 4, 2024. What is the contrary of some politicians are traditional? What is the answer? Is there an answer? This is an I proposition. Does it have a contrary proposition? The answer is no. Because contrary is applicable to propositions having the same subject and predicate terms, same universal quantity, but different in quality. This one is particular in quantity. So what is involved here is what we call subcontrary. What is that? What is subcontrary? It is the logical opposition involved between two propositions with the same subject and predicate, same particular quantity, but different qualities. So if the propositions involved are universal propositions, contrary ang tawag doon. If the propositions involved having the same subject and predicate terms, but same particular quantity but different in qualities. That is what we call subcontrary, meaning it's between I and O, or O and I. Example, some boys are honest, some boys are not honest. I and O, subcontrary. The rule is this: they cannot be both false, okay, although they might be both true. Kabaligtaran noong contrary, rules on contrary opposition. Okay? They cannot be both false. Meaning, if an I proposition is false, necessarily the O proposition is true. However, if one is true, we cannot derive a valid conclusion from its subcontrary. It is doubtful because it's possible that both of them are true. Again, if one is false, then the other one is true. But if one is true, we cannot derive a certain conclusion from its subcontrary proposition. Let's apply the rules. It is true that some boys are two-timer. Therefore, it is false to say that some boys are two-timer. Is it valid? Is this a valid argument? The premise is an I proposition, correct? And the conclusion is an O proposition, meaning the opposition involved here, since they have the same subject and predicate terms, the opposition involved here is subcontrary. And we say, if one proposition is true, can we derive the truth value of its subcontrary proposition? The answer is no. But we say in this argument, it is false to say that some boys are not two-timers. We derive a conclusion. So that is invalid argument. If it is false to say that some teachers are not high school graduates, ergo, some teachers are high school graduates. The premise is an O proposition, and the conclusion is an I proposition. There is opposition, which we call subcontrary. Did it follow the rule? The answer is yes. We say they cannot be both false. Like in this argument, the O is false, the O proposition is false, and the I proposition is true. Okay, it's a valid argument. Okay, the last opposition that we are going to discuss is what we call subalternation. It's a logical opposition involved between two propositions with same subject and predicate, same quality, but different in quantity. All right. If such is the case, it is between A and I. Okay. Between A and I, because they have the same subject and predicate, same quality. Both of them are affirmative. Same quality but different in quantity. We call it subalternation. There's also subalternation between E and O. Same subject and predicate, but the same quality. Both of them are negative propositions, but different in quantity. So that is what we call subalternation. Burahin lang. For example, all items are on sale. So this is an A proposition. Some items are on sale. I proposition. We call this subalternation. Same subject and predicate terms. Same quality, but different in quantity. Some rivers do not overflow. All rivers do not overflow. This is an O proposition and an E proposition. We call this Subalternation. Okay. The universal proposition is what we call superaltern. The A proposition is a superaltern, while the I proposition is a subaltern. The E proposition is the superaltern. The O proposition is the subaltern. This is the rule. We have two rules for subalternation. The first rule pertains to the universal proposition, to the superaltern. If the superaltern is true, then the subaltern is necessarily true as well. Totoo na nga yun sa universal eh. Siyempre sa mga particular, totoo rin. All men are mortals. Okay? Pag sinabi mong some men are mortals, that is also true. If the superaltern is true, then the subaltern is necessarily true as well. But if the superaltern is false, can we derive a valid conclusion from its subaltern? The answer is no. We cannot derive a valid conclusion from a false superaltern to its subaltern. That should be doubtful. All men, you say, it's false to say that all men are birds. Okay? If your basis is just that premise, it is false to say that all men are birds. Can we necessarily derive a conclusion that some men are birds? Is also false? Doubtful yun. Or true? Doubtful din yun. That's invalid. Okay? Another rule. This pertains to the particular proposition because subaltern. If the subaltern is false, baliktad. If the subaltern is false, then the superaltern is necessarily false as well. Okay? If the particular is already, we determine the truth value of the particular, which is false. Necessarily, the universal is false already. Okay? You are sure that it is not true that some Thomasians are scholars. Let's say that is the case. Okay? You say, you are sure that it is false to say that some Thomasians are scholars. What should be the truth value of all Thomasians are scholars? Necessarily, that is also false. Okay? But if the subaltern is true, we cannot derive a certain conclusion in its superaltern. The superaltern now will be doubtful. Example, it is true that some birds do not fly. Therefore, all birds do not fly. The premise is an O proposition, while the conclusion is an E proposition. So what is the opposition involved? Subalternation. And we say the subaltern, the particular, the subaltern is true. What should be the truth value of the superaltern? It must be doubtful, correct? Based on rule number 2. If the subaltern is true, you cannot derive a conclusion from its superaltern. But we derive a conclusion here. It's invalid. Okay? It is true that some prisoners are convicted. Therefore, all prisoners are convicted. The premise is an I proposition, while the conclusion is an A proposition. So subalternation is involved here. If the subaltern is false, if the subaltern here is true, what should be the truth value of the superaltern? It must be doubtful, but we derive a conclusion. So this is invalid. Okay. Another example, if it is true that all Thomasians are lovers of wisdom, A proposition. Hence, it is also true that some Thomasians are lovers of wisdom. Now, this is valid. Okay. As I have mentioned, the premise is an A proposition, while the conclusion is an I proposition. And the rule says, rule number 1 says that if the superaltern, the universal, if the superaltern is true, necessarily the subaltern is true as well. So the argument follow the rule, it's valid. It's a valid argument. Another example, it is true that all reporters are not biased, which is an E proposition. Therefore, some reporters are not biased, which is an O proposition. In this argument, we have opposition, which we call subalternation. Sabi natin sa rule number 1, if the superaltern is true, what should be the truth value of the subaltern? Necessarily true as well. Nasunod ba? Yes. This is a valid argument. Again, we have four. We have four logical oppositions. Contradictory, contrary, subcontrary, and subalternation. Okay, subalternation. So for you to easily remember the rules, let's see kung makakatulong sa inyo itong summary ko or tip sa inyo. If the universal proposition is true, all the propositions have truth value. There is no doubtful. If the given is a universal proposition, meaning A or E. Let's say you have an A proposition which is true. What is the truth value of its contradictory proposition? O. What should be the truth value of O? Necessarily, it's false because they have contradictory truth value. They cannot be both true, they cannot be both false. There is no doubtful in contradictory opposition, correct? So, if A is true, the O is necessarily false. If A is true, what should be the truth value of I? So, the relation here is subalternation. If the superaltern is true, what is the truth value of the subaltern? Necessarily true as well, correct? Okay, rule number 1 in subalternation. If A is true, what should be the truth value of its contrary proposition? The rule says they cannot be both true, meaning the E proposition necessarily is false. There is no doubtful if the given is universal. But if the universal is false, makikinig. If the universal is false, let's say A is false, alin lang ang may truth value dyan na sigurado tayo? The O proposition, because wala namang doubtful sa contradiction eh. Because in contradiction, if one is true, the other one is false. But if one is false, its contradictory proposition is necessarily true. Correct? So what should be the truth value of its subaltern? Rule number 1, di ba? Okay. If the superaltern is false, we cannot derive. Okay? We are not sure about the truth value of its subaltern. So this is doubtful. If you derive a conclusion, that will be invalid. What should be the truth value of its contrary proposition? Okay? It is also doubtful because it's possible that both of them are false. Okay? It is possible that if A is false, it's either true or false. So you should not derive a conclusion from its contrary proposition. Okay? If you observe, if the universal proposition is true, there is no doubtful, correct? But if the universal proposition is false, for example, this is false. The E proposition is given, okay, which is false. What should be the truth value of an O proposition? It should be doubtful, correct? Okay. Rule number 1 in subalternation. If the superaltern is false, you should not derive a conclusion because that should be doubtful. Okay. What should be the truth value of its contrary? Doubtful then, because it's possible that both of them are false. But is there a doubtful uh, truth value when it comes to contradiction? No. You can always derive the truth value of its contradictory proposition. This is necessarily true. Okay. Let's go now to the particular proposition. Kayong malilito. Okay. Let's say an I proposition is false. If an I proposition is false, what should be the truth value of its contradictory proposition? Necessarily true because they have contradictory opposition. If one is false, the other one is true. Okay. If an I is true, what should be the truth if an I is false, what should be the truth value of its superaltern? Necessary, it's false already. Rule number 2 in subalternation, if the subaltern is false, necessarily the superaltern is false as well. Okay? Subcontrary, if an I is false, what should be the truth value of an O proposition? This should be true. Okay? Because they can rule in subcontrary, Rule in subcontrary. They cannot be both false. Meaning, if the given is false, necessarily the O is true. If you observe, baliktad naman sa mga particular. Okay? If the particular is false, and that is the given, there is no doubtful. Every proposition have truth value, There is no doubtful proposition. But if the particular, for example, O or I, sige, lagay naman natin sa O. Let's say this is true. If the particular is true. Okay, can we derive the truth value of A? It's contradictory proposition? Yes, necessarily it's false because they have contradictory proposition. What is the truth value of its superaltern? Subalternation. Okay, doubtful yan. Rule number 2 applies, If the subaltern is true, we cannot derive a conclusion. We are not sure about the truth value of the superaltern. Okay? What about its subcontrary? What is the truth value of I? If we say O is true, this is also doubtful. So if you observe, if the given is particular and the truth value is true, okay, you can only derive the truth value of its contradictory proposition. Contradictory proposition. While the other two are doubtful. Again. Okay. So remember that. But the key is for you to understand the rules. But in short, that's how I summarize the rules. If for example this is true, can we derive the truth value of E, O, and I? The answer is yes. Okay. This is false, true, false. But if an A is false, for example, if an A is false, can we derive the truth value of all the propositions in the square of oppositions? The answer is no. You can only derive the truth value of its contradictory proposition. It should be true. And the I is doubtful and the E is doubtful as well. All right. Um, if the truth value of the particular proposition, let's say I, is false, can we derive the truth value of all the three propositions in the square proposition? The answer is yes. Necessarily, the superaltern is false, its contradictory proposition is true, and the subcontrary is necessarily true as well. But if the particular, say here, the I proposition is true, can we derive the truth value of the three proposition? The answer is no. We can only derive the truth value of its contradiction or contradictory proposition. It should be false, while the superaltern is doubtful and the contrary is doubtful as well, based on our rule. So let's apply. Let's see kung naiintindihan natin yung mga concept na ito. Okay. What is the contradictory proposition of some police operations are extrajudicial? Meron ba yan? This is an I proposition. Necessarily, its contradictory proposition is an E, di ba? It must be an E proposition. No police operation is extrajudicial. You can put it as all police operations are not extrajudicial. So that should be your answer if you're asked in the exam. What is the subalternation of not all members of Akbayan are nationalists? So what type of proposition is this? This is an O proposition, correct? So what is the subalternation? It should be an E, di ba? No member of Akbayan is nationalist. That should be your answer. Or all members of Akbayan are not nationalists. Mothers are women having children. If you are asked to give the contrary proposition, this is an A proposition, eh? Okay? Because the sense of that are all mothers are women having a child. So the contrary proposition are mothers are not women having a child. E proposition. What is the contrary proposition of some Facebook users are trolls? What will be your answer if you are asked to give the contrary proposition? Is there a contrary proposition of some Facebook users are trolls? The answer is no, because contrary opposition is only involved in universal propositions, while this given is a particular proposition. It should be sub-contrary opposition. Now, meron ding mga ganitong mga questions. If it is true that some priests are morally incompetent, what is the truth value of the following? So determine first the truth value of the given. Some priests are morally incompetent, which is an I proposition. So what is the truth value of not all priests are morally incompetent? This is an O proposition, di ba? So the given here is an I proposition. So what is the truth value of an O proposition if it is true? It should be doubtful. Okay? Kasi true daw ito eh. Remember, if the given is particular and is true, there's only one. Isa lang ang merong truth value niya, di ba? False. Yung kanyang E. Okay? Doubtful. Okay? All priests are morally incompetent, which is an A proposition. It should be doubtful. And then no priest is morally incompetent, must be false. Can you follow? Okay? Another example. Please ko lang. Another example. It is false that some monkeys are tarsier. If it is false that some monkeys are tertiary, what is the truth value of the following? So the given is an I proposition na naman. This is an I proposition. Okay? An I proposition. Sabi mo yung I is false. Okay. The given is I, which is false. Okay. So if I is false, the A is necessarily false as well. The E is necessarily true, while the O is necessarily true. All monkeys are tertiary. So that is false because the opposition involved here is subalternation. If the subaltern is false necessarily, the superaltern is false as well. All monkeys are not tertiary. So that is an E proposition. If an I proposition is false, necessarily it's true. That is contradiction, ano? Contradictory opposition. Some monkeys are not tertiary. That is an O proposition. So if an I is false, necessarily it's true. We call that subcontrary relation. Okay. Another example. All mammals, it is true. It is true that some mammals feed their young with milk. So the given is an A proposition. An A proposition. A, E, I, and O. The given is an A proposition, which is true. The truth value is true. So what did I say? Okay. If the universal has the truth value, if the truth value of the universal is true, do we have doubtful proposition? The answer is no. All of them have truth value. Walang doubtful kang isasagot dyan. So an A is true, the I is necessarily true, the E is false, and then the O is false as well. Some mammals feed their young with milk. Oh, that's an I proposition, true yan. No mammal feed their young with milk. Again, that is an E proposition, false. Not all mammals feed their young with milk. That's an O proposition, false. All right? There is no doubtful truth value if the given is a universal, meaning an A or O, which is true. If it is false that all open pit mining are safe, hindi talaga yan. Walang safe naman talaga na open pit mining, ano? Okay? If it is false that all open pit mining are safe, what is the truth value of the following? All right? All open pit mining are safe. So, ang sabi kasi false daw yung A. If the universal is false, can we derive the truth value of all the three propositions? The answer is no. Okay? So, ito lang yung may truth value dyan, no? Which is true. Then, doubtful na itong dalawa. All open pit mining are not safe, should be doubtful. The answer should be doubtful. Ano? Some open pit mining are safe. It should be doubtful as well. I proposition. And then, true. Yung kanyang O proposition. Okay? Can you follow? Dali lang to. Dali lang tong square of opposition. Now, it is true that some congressmen are members of Liberal Party. Therefore, some congressmen are not members of Liberal Party. Is this valid? The premise is an I proposition, while the conclusion is an O proposition. Invalid ito, ano? The opposition involved here is subcontrary. And the rule says that if it is possible that both of them are true. Okay. Invalid. It is true that some Filipinos have colonial mentality. So no Filipino have colonial mentality. The premise is an I proposition, while the conclusion is an E proposition. Okay, what is the opposition involved in this argument? The answer is contradictory. Did it follow the rule of contradiction? No. Kasi ang sense ng argument na ito, both I and E proposition are true. They cannot be both true. They cannot be both false. Invalid contradiction. Invalid contradiction. Another example, if it is true that some rosaries are satanic, therefore, not all rosaries are satanic. The premise is an I proposition, and the conclusion is an O proposition. Nasunod ba yung rule of subcontrary? No. It is possible that both of them are true. You cannot derive a conclusion from an I which is true to an O proposition, to its subcontrary. Okay. It is true that not all sea creatures are fish. Thus, it is false to say that all creatures are fish. The premise is an O proposition, correct? It's an O proposition, while the conclusion is an A proposition. Okay? So the relation is, what is the opposition involved here? O and A. Contradiction. Nasunod ba yung rule? Yes. Valid contradiction. Okay, so remember the rules of square of opposition. We will have some exercise after we watch this.